Please join me in welcoming Associate Professor Rebecca Lee.
Thank you, Provost Scheer, Chancellor Sartorelli, members of the Board of Trustees, distinguished guests, my fellow faculty and staff members, and most importantly, our graduates and their families. It is my profound pleasure to be here today. I'd like to dedicate my remarks to your classmate, Jason Bradford, who passed away in January of this year, 4 months shy of this day. Jason lived most of his life in a wheelchair and had very little use of his body, but his mind was nimble, intelligent, generous, sympathetic, and nobody could write better about the body in motion and in flight. I invoke his name today because I am sad that he is not here with you graduating, but also because he stands as a perfect example of the true value of an education to give the mind power over circumstance and over the inevitable frailty of life. As his mother wrote to his classmates after he died, I need to inform you that Jason has decided to explore more of the universe. He would want you to move out of your comfort zone as well and explore new possibilities. So in preparing for this speech, I wrote emails to various departments asking what exactly this class of graduates had done in their time here. And I got back the most interesting cross-section of activity you can imagine. There isn't a problem in this modern world, big or small, that this class hasn't faced down, studied, wondered about, or attempted already to solve. I picked out 10 examples from a staggering list of activities. This class has 1, drawn historical comparisons between the current presidential candidates and former world leaders, which I wish I could read today. Studied climate change's effect on coral reefs. 3, gathered narratives from children in poverty and turned them into stories geared specifically for middle schoolers. 4, collected data on memory loss in aging brains. 5, studied the habits of centenarians who all live to be 100. 6, produced Venn diagrams mapping human and artificial intelligence. 7, studied the nervous system of octopi and novel new thinking on treatments for MS. 8, they wrote biographies of the state's oldest living citizens, immortalizing stories from the early part of the 20th century. 9, they studied Dutch elm disease in trees. 10, they studied the efficacy of testing in elementary schools. And 11, they studied voter suppression and bias, consumer behavior as it relates to the seasons, divergences and similarities between Muslim and Christian texts. They wrote sentences of heartbreaking beauty and psychological intensity. This list is so long and covers the past as well as the future. It reaches into every corner of human thought. It filled me with pride. Even the projects that were turned down filled me with pride. One student proposed while he was still living in the dorms to build an ice rink in his room by building a false floor and pumping in water over cooling coils. The department chair turned down this proposal for an independent study. But I think this student should get some weird medal today along with his diploma for attempting something both ludicrous and terrific. My own field is creative writing, and the thing we treasure and the thing we fear in creative writing is the blank page, something you are all deeply familiar with after years at UNCW. The blank page or screen represents the moment at the beginning when it's just you. You have to write the first sentence. The mind reels. It wants to leave the room to go do something else and to not start. But one of the things you've had to do to get to today is to start things again and again and again, and to start really hard things without knowing the end. This is a muscle, a really essential emotional and intellectual muscle that you will use and build and strengthen for the rest of your life. I spend a lot of the summer in the Silicon Valley in California. Like Wilmington, it's near the coast and very beautiful, and it's where much of the tech industry is located. A lot of startups begin there. One of the most arresting images for me is what startups look like from the outside. Kind of like nothing. You'll be walking on a busy street in Palo Alto, every storefront and restaurant full of bustling activity and color and abundance, and then you'll come across a startup in a big, white, empty space. It's just a person sitting in an empty room, or two people, or a few, but to me, it's almost a holy sight. You know right away you're looking at the beginning of something when it just exists inside these people's minds. Even just catching a glimpse of it, walking past, every part of you wants to see the future. Are they gonna do it, whatever it is? So I graduated from college in 1989. George Bush Sr. was president, having just taken over from Ronald Reagan, to give you a sense of the times. I had no idea what I was going to do next. I wanted to be a writer, of all things. I just knew the next step, and I literally mean the next step. After the ceremony, I had to get all my belongings and pack them back in my parents' car. I wasn't at all certain how to proceed, but luckily, as our car made its way later and later into the night, heading up in the darkness through the American Midwest to my childhood home in Canada, I had a line from my favorite writer, E.L. Doctorow, running through my mind. Going into the future is like driving at night in the fog. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way. As it turned out, my little startup storefront was my parents' basement, but it did the trick. Recently, I've been reading a biography of Steve Jobs, that great, complicated, now deceased founder of Apple, itself a little uncertain startup in 1976. He said of that time in the 1970s, at the beginning, when computers were still the size of this first row of professors, he said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. So you have to trust your instinct, your God, your karma. You have to go on faith." I think when you look back, really great things, works of art, companies, projects, even families, look continuous and powerful and like destiny, when really at the time they were built by a series of steps and missteps and people who had the courage to keep starting over again and again. One of the goals of UNCW has been to prepare you for that room where you have to really trust yourself, your own ability to begin, to see things privately and powerfully, to have a vision and to concentrate on it and to work hard. Please know how much we respect you and are rooting for you and trust you. Thanks to the families and congratulations.